Hello,
Howdy.
everybody.
How'd you like that Mexican hat dance?
Oh, I love stomping on Watchtower.
Yeah, we're going to do some more stomping this evening. It's getting close to Benny by time, so we're in our nightwear, and so we thought maybe we would just...
And still working.
Yeah, exactly. Get a little bit of rum going here. But if you remember one of the last few videos we did, we had Josh send us a recording of the Bible study he was having with Jehovah's Witnesses from What Does the Bible Really Teach book. And this is the book that Watchtower uses to start the indoctrination process. And after we had, done what we did in that video, we put everything away and it's like, oh, I thought of a perfect illustration that I could destroy this even further. And of course, I thought of a few other scriptures and everything else.
You usually do.
To go along with this, yes. And we all know that as Jehovah's Witnesses, and even on the theocratic ministry school, we are taught to use effective illustrations. In fact, I even think it was called effective use of illustrations. Or
I think you gave that talk.
Yeah, I may have. But I just want to kind of recall, yes?
Well, I was just going to say, we all know you're very good about gestures. So.
Oh, yeah. yeah. You want to see how crazy I can get? Just turn off the volume.
And just watch
Here they come again. Yeah.
Just watch the gestures.
So, here.
Did I make you lose your thought?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here, let's toast to Mikey losing his train of thought. There we go. Yeah, we're kind of being humorous tonight. But if you recall, when you heard that portion of the Bible study with Josh, and of course, Josh, we had already emailed you and told you what I was going to do with this illustration, because I think it's very, very effective. And it illustrates how silly this whole blood thing is from Watchtower's perspective. Especially when you start dealing with fractions. But if you recall, when Josh started talking about blood and the brother and sister, that sister made a really ignorant comment by saying, yeah, and they all got infected or got sick. Or
disease.
They all got a disease. Those that have been watching our channel for quite some time, and I haven't used this phrase for quite a while, but, Watchtower is really good at manufacturing ignorance. And this sister's comment, in my opinion, was the epitome of manufactured ignorance. When she made that comment, then they all get a disease, just ignorant. But then, I think if I remember right, even in that video, we used Jeffrey Jackson's clip about blood fractions, and he said, with medical science, blah, 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 and now it becomes a conscience matter. Well, I'm going to debunk that right now, Watchtower. I don't give a shit how good medical science is. I'm going to show you something right now, how lame your fractions has become.
Yeah, because, whether it's whole blood or fractions, it's the same.
Yeah. I'll illustrate it like this. You see this, Watchtower? This is a lead round ball. This is pure lead. Now, everybody knows how toxic lead can be, right? But if I take it and fraction it up into little tiny pieces and start ingesting the lead in little tiny pieces, is it any less toxic? No, it's not. When you take whole blood and fraction it up into little pieces, it's still blood. So either it's against God's law completely, or it's not. Now, if you have allowed fractions to be a conscience matter, then it stands to reason you have to let whole blood now become a conscience matter. Because no matter how small you slice and dice the lead and ingest it, it's still just as toxic. Illustration works well with mercury also. Now, I'm going a little bit further with this, because Jehovah's Witnesses, in your refusing of blood, many Jehovah's Witnesses' lives were spared, especially when the AIDS epidemic hit the world. And we all remember what that was like. Blood was contaminated around the world. And at that point in time, you know, this whole AIDS thing, this whole AIDS virus was new. Not many people knew about it. And it caught everybody, especially the medical profession, caught them off guard.
Well, I can remember talks around that time period, too, from the platform.
Yeah, and, you know, aren't you glad that Jehovah protected us from this dreadful disease, this dreadful virus, because we adhere to God's law and the sanctity of blood. I'm going to illustrate it like this. How many of us have gone to the grocery store and bought that nice little bag of pre-made salad? You know, it's got lettuce in it, might have some carrot slices in it. It might have, you know, some other things that would go with a salad. Maybe a little bit of cabbage, red or green cabbage.
Well, I can think of one thing that I know where you're going with this, and I can think of one thing that has a problem, a real problem with this, and it's alfalfa sprouts.
Alfalfa sprouts, exactly.
They always have a problem.
What happens is that you buy this bag of pre-made salad, take it home, put it in the bowl, pour your favorite little dressing on it. Oh, Mikey uses a little bit more dressing than most, and then you eat it. And then the next day it's like, oh, I don't feel good. And maybe 2 days later you're sitting on the pot figuring out,
hospital.
Or in the hospital, because what you ate, and unbeknownst to you at the time, it was either contaminated with E. coli, or what's the other one? Salmonella. Okay? Now, at that point, the news starts letting the world know, hey, if you bought this product on such and such date and the expiration date, you might want to throw it away because it's been contaminated. So you throw it away. A few weeks later, you know, you're feeling better. Fortunately, you didn't die. You're feeling better, and then you hear in the news, oh, that contamination problem's all been solved. You can go back to eating the bag of lettuce again. Do you go back and buy it, Jehovah's Witnesses, thinking you're 100% safe? We all do, don't we? Because the problem has been corrected, just like the problem with the AIDS in the blood supply was corrected, wasn't it? And the screening processes that modern science uses today to screen blood pretty much, I won't say guarantees a safe supply of blood.
It's a lot better.
But it's a lot better than it has been in years past. Okay? But it's interesting that when I was trying to do a little bit of reference work from Watchtower's own concordance on this whole blood thing, I found it interesting that as much as Watchtower tries to make its members feel blood guilty, I mean, I hunt animals, and in years past, I've invited the brothers in my house and have some wild game, and what's the first question? Oh, was that properly bled? Well, yeah, I'm a brother. You shouldn't have to ask that question, but it's still asked all the time. But it's interesting, because when you go to their concordance, you look under blood guilt, not one reference in the Christian Greek scriptures. In fact, blood guilt ends with Proverbs 28:17. Okay, blood guiltiness, there's only one, Psalm 51:14. Blood guilty ends at Ezra 22. Excuse me, I need my glasses. Thank you. Ezekiel 22:2. Okay, blood shed ends at Habakkuk 2:12. Blood stained ends at Zechariah 9:7. Bloodthirsty, Proverbs 29:10. Now it's interesting that all of the phrases that have to do with blood guilt, there's nothing in the Christian Greek scriptures that holds a Christian to being blood guilty, as like what Watchtower does. So what Watchtower does is they're taking an old part of the Mosaic Law and making it fit in modern day terms because of what happens at Act what was stated in Acts 15 when James told them to remain, keep abstaining from blood. But just going back to that old Mosaic law, we know that when Noah came out of the ark, allegedly, God gave him a command that he could eat all sorts of flesh, but not to eat the blood because the life was in the blood. Well, then the Mosaic law come along and a few other things were added, blah, blah, blah. It was God's choice to do this, I guess. But did God ever really hold men to that condemnation of death for improperly eating the blood like Watchtower tries to make its people today? Well, let's go to 1 Samuel 14.
I'm just going to grab something. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. 1 Samuel 14. And we all know this, starting at verse 31. And on that day, they kept striking down the Philistines from Mishmash to Aijalon. And it's been a long time since I read these words, trust me. And the people got to be very tired. And the people began darting greedily at the spoil, and taking sheep and cattle and calves, and slaughtering them on the earth. And the people fell to eating along with the blood. Now remember, this is Saul and his military force. They were eating meat that was improperly bled. Did God kill them? Did anybody kill them? Did Saul kill them for committing this gross sin? Let me go on. Verse 33. So they told Saul, saying, look, the people are sinning against Jehovah by eating along with the blood. At this, he said, you have dealt treacherously. First of all, roll a great stone to me. After that, Saul said, scatter among the people, and you must say to them, bring near to me, each one of you, his bull, and each one his sheep, and you must do the slaughtering in this place, and the eating, and you must not sin against Jehovah by eating along with the blood. Accordingly, all the people brought near each one his bull that was in his hand that night, and did the slaughtering there. And Saul proceeded to build an altar to Jehovah. With it, he started altar building to Jehovah. Did you get the sense of it, Jehovah's Witnesses? These men were eating the blood along with the meat. All Saul did to correct that error was to build an altar and sacrifice for that sin. Nobody was killed. Nobody was judged adversely. Nobody was judged worthy of getting into the new system of things. Now, here's another one that Jehovah's Witnesses very, very seldom look at.
Well, especially since we're all, Gentiles and not under the Mosaic law. Witnesses aren't under the Mosaic law.
Well, really, Christ fulfilled the law. He lived the law perfectly.
Yeah.
So does that mean that Jews today are under this law? Well, we do know that Jews donate blood, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to do that first, or do you want me to do this?
Either way.
Well, go ahead.
Okay.
I need to have a sip here.
Shepherd the Flock of God book. Page 111. Now this is chapter 9 under implications of disassociation. So you can disassociate yourself without even writing a letter, just by your actions. And under the third point, and then the third dot down, it says willingly and unrepentantly taking blood. If someone willingly takes blood, perhaps because of being under extreme pressure, the committee should obtain the facts and determine the individual's attitude. If he is repentant, the committee would provide spiritual assistance in the spirit of Galatians 6:1 and Jude 22:23. Since he is spiritually weak, he would not qualify for special privileges for a period of time, and it may be necessary to remove certain basic privileges. Depending on the circumstances, the committee may also need to arrange for an announcement to the congregation. So if you're repentant enough, nothing happens.
Nothing happens. See, when Jehovah's Witnesses study this book with you, they really try to enforce being obedient to God's law in the prohibition of blood. But even in the elders book,
Well, I was going to say,
they don't go that far, do they?
It doesn't say anything about against God's law.
Exactly. It doesn't.
If you're truly repentant, guess what? It's forgiven you.
That's right. And even God knew that. And God still knows that. Get your Bibles, Jehovah's Witnesses. Go to Leviticus chapter 17. We're going to talk a little bit about properly bled meat and eating blood a little bit. Well, actually, Saul took care of that because they ate the blood with the meat. And all that was required was just a sacrifice to forgive the sin, and the sin was forgiven. So they did eat the animal blood. Leviticus chapter 17 and chapter 17 will start at verse 13. Now this was interesting because when Deep Throat showed this to me, it threw me through a loop because it totally unlearned everything I had learned about properly bled meat from Jehovah's Witness perspective. Starting at verse 13, Leviticus chapter 17. As for any man of the sons of Israel, or some alien resident who is residing as an alien in your midst, who in hunting catches a wild beast or a fowl that may be eaten, he must, in that case, pour its blood out and cover it with dust. Now, when I was learning to hunt as a young man in one of Jehovah's Witnesses, this is what they stuck to. Oh, you kill an animal, bleed it, cover it with dust, and you're fine with God. Never has any Jehovah's Witness gone past verse 13 into 14. 14 says, for the soul of every sort of flesh is its blood, by the soul in it. Consequently, I said to the sons of Israel, now you do understand that this is God speaking, you must not eat the blood of any sort of flesh, because the soul of every sort of flesh is its blood. Anyone eating it will be cut off. See, we're not talking about the eating of it like those men did with the animal flesh. There's something more involved that was going on around the nations. And if you do some historical research, you'll see that men were religiously eating the blood. And this is what God was warning these people against. Because look at the next verse. As for any soul that eats a body already dead, wait a minute, eating a body already dead, or something torn by a wild beast. Wait a minute, so you're talking about something that's not properly bled. Exactly. So that would be like today, we could look at it in modern terms. You're driving down the road and you come across a roadkill. Big old buck, big old elk. As a Jehovah's Witness, would you eat it? You would say, oh, no, because it had not been properly bled. But Leviticus answers that question because you people don't know the Bible like you think you do. You're throwing all this nonsense out here about the blood doctrine, and you're uneducated. You're manufacturing ignorance. Okay, so starting again at verse 15. As for any soul that eats a body already dead, or something torn by a wild beast, whether a native or an alien resident, see, this applied to the Jews because they were the alien residents. He must, in that case, wash his garments and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. And he must be clean. But if he will not wash them and will not bathe his flesh, he must then answer for his error. You understand, Jehovah's Witnesses? Even in the old days of the Levitical law, you could eat unbled meat and still be pleasing to God. Now, the thing that Jehovah's Witnesses miss horribly and why it's not talked about in the Christian Greek scriptures.
Did you lose your bookmark again?
Yeah, my bookmarker fell out, but it was in Hebrews. Let me get the Hebrews here.
Happens a lot, you know.
Well, my bookmarker fell out on the ground. Oh, there it is. I lied. Okay, Hebrews chapter 9. Because, see, this is something that Jehovah's Witnesses will not contemplate because they would rather stick with manufactured ignorance. Okay? Hebrews chapter 9, Paul writing to the Hebrew congregation, starting at verse 11. However, when Christ came as high priest of the good things that have come to pass through the greater and more perfect tent not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered, no, not with the blood of goats and of young bulls, but with his own blood, once for all time into the holy place, and obtained an everlasting deliverance for us. Do you comprehend that, Jehovah's Witnesses? That is an everlasting deliverance. That's an everlasting forgiveness of sin. For if the blood of goats and of bulls and the ash of a heifer sprinkled on those who have been defiled sanctifies to the extent of cleanness of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through an everlasting Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, cleanse our consciences from dead works, that we may render sacred service to the living God. You see, Jehovah's Witnesses, when you allow this Watchtown Bible Tract Society to hold you to an old archaic law regarding blood, then you have returned to what the scripture says, the dead works that Christ cleansed us from. You don't comprehend that because you're always listening to the words of Watchtower instead of doing your own research. That's why a guy like me can come up with a lead ball that represents whole blood. I lost my other bullet. I can come up with a lead ball and say this represents whole blood. If I ingest it, it's very toxic. Watchtower says if you take whole blood, you're sinning against God. Now Watchtower comes along and says, well, you can take the whole blood and fraction it up into tiny, tiny little pieces and ingest it. And you're not breaking God's law because now it's a conscience matter. But as I explained earlier, you fraction this little lead ball up into tiny little pieces, it's still just as toxic. So Watchtower, how's that for effective use of illustrations?
That's kind of like straining out the gnat and gulping down the camel. That's exactly what Watchtower's doing. They're straining out the gnat and gulping down the camel. Yeah. So Josh, I hope these illustrations work. I hope the scriptures that I pointed to show that Watchtower absolutely has his blood issue backwards. Yeah, because apparently the study conductor has been bugging him to continue his study. So because he's had such good response in the comments under, that recording, he might possibly be doing some more.
Yeah.
So we look forward to that.
Yeah.
And thank you, Josh, and thank you everyone for your wonderful comments. And
thanks for watching this one.
yeah, thanks for watching this one. And I think it's time to go get some rest.
Time to go to bed.
It's been a long day.
Yes. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
And am I right in understanding that the governing body's interpretation of the scriptures on any particular point might change or develop from time to time?
That is correct as well.
So I think some examples might be, for example, firstly, the question of blood fractions and whether that is or isn't covered by the prohibition for the receipt of blood transfusions.
That is correct as well, but if I could just mention, when blood transfusions were first introduced, there wasn't a lot of options with regard to blood fractions.
Yes, but my point is, or what I'm seeking to understand is there was an interpretation at one point which said that members of the Jehovah's Witnesses should not receive blood fractions, but in more recent times it's been accepted, as I understand it, that there's no specific scriptural direction on that, so on blood fractions, that is, so that's a matter for the individual conscience of Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's right. And Mr. Stewart, if I may mention, this is an example of the desire of the governing body not to go beyond the scriptures. Clearly, we have the direction in Acts chapter 15, 28 and 29 against blood. But if I could also mention, you see, as with anything in the community, more and more knowledge becomes available medically. It can be very overwhelming trying to see all the latest medical research and so on. But the governing body tries to make sure that they don't go beyond what is written. If we see that a direction from the scriptures has perhaps been used too broadly, then we're the first ones to try to correct that.